Hi, I'm Chris Sugden, managing partner at Edison Partners and your host of Electrifying Growth. This is Sit Down with Sugden, where I share from my experiences as both the investor and an operator to help you get that next stage of growth.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another Sit Down with me, Chris Sugden. Thanks for joining. The last time we spoke about kind of healthy urgency, the topic of healthy urgency was a CEO summit topic this year at Edison Partners. And it really seemed to strike a nerve with our CEO attendees. Anytime you want to put something in front of urgency, it doesn't sound like you're just making up a crisis or that you're running around with your head cut off. So we thought healthy urgency was a good way to frame it. And it seems to have worked, not only with our CEOs, but even the audience out there. It seemed to kind of resonate. So as we think about the end of that last conversation, I was leaving folks with the idea that, it doesn't mean giving up a vision. It just means being very focused, but at the same time, chasing something that you think others will perceive as valuable as opposed to what you perceive in your business as valuable is what we'll talk about here as far as really putting into action what it means to have healthy urgency and what it means to go execute against it, if you will. So as we think more about this sort of what's ambition, what's speed, because when we think about urgency, we think about fast and going faster, what's really being true to the vision or the opportunity you see in front of you and being true to that versus what you think the outside world will perceive as valuable. And in our game, right, in the investing game and in the grow tech company game, there's a lot of outside influences that can do that to you. And I think as we look at what would be viewed as kind of healthy urgency and healthy ambition, if you will, and having sort of this clarity around the different paradoxes of, be fast, be quick, but don't be in a hurry. That's a football coach said that once. And I remember as a young kid, it was like, how's that even possible? What does that mean? I think it's sort of the idea in business, again, the healthy urgency of knowing that some things you can't rush. Customers' decisions will take the time they're taking. Building your pipeline needs to be really deep because some customers are going to be operating on their time frame, not your time frame. But as it relates to even just growing your business and thinking about your employees or your team members and what they perceive from you as, urgency versus the next bright, shiny object. I think that's what we see a lot of, for lack of a better way to put it, earlier stage entrepreneurs. As you know, Edison invests in something that's a little bit more growth stage. So I'll say hopefully more established, but generally speaking, our companies have 15, 20, $30 million of revenue at the time we invest, sort of what I'm describing as the earlier stage conundrum of chasing the bright, shiny object, because that's going to get you to your goal faster. The amount of confusion that creates for your team, your development team. This week, I was supposed to be developing these set of requirements. And now this week, I got a customer who's changed our entire product roadmap. That's the kind of thing that outside influences changing kind of what's important. Even more so, we've seen it where the customer says, if you only did this, which let's face it, from a sales perspective, if only sounds like something we could do tomorrow, especially frankly, CEOs who are called sales-oriented, sales-minded CEOs. You want to please the customer. You want to land the customer. We know revenue and revenue growth is in many ways, the key to unlocking value. So you'll allow yourself to sort of be convinced that's a small change when the whole team sees it as a complete sea change. And so when we think about, there's also the current sort of growth strategy du jour, if you will, is product-led growth. And so we're out there as a sales organization or as a CEO, as a management team, talking to customers about our product or talking through the internet, through different channels about our product and letting people know what we do. And now we start to get some feedback. And what we think is important to the customer that is sharing their thoughts with us isn't exactly on the same page. So immediately we're thinking it's our problem, versus we talking to the wrong customer, or maybe the customer feedback we're getting is only a small sample. Let me not give the impression, however, that we can't listen to the market. It's sort of a dangerous slippery slope here to go. We're not all Steve Jobs. Jobs famous for saying the customer doesn't know what they want, right? They didn't know they wanted a phone and a Walkman and an email box all in their hand. And I make the Walkman joke because that ages me. But the point is, we didn't know we wanted to play music and now movies and now all the social feeds we get literally carrying around with us every day. When the iPhone was first introduced, Jobs was telling the market, this is what you need or want, Mr. or Mrs. Consumer. And none of us really knew that's what we wanted. He's one of the very few and far between that can sort of just truly bend, shall we say, the curve of what people want versus what they think they want or what they think they need. So I want to be careful in giving this advice, which is may come across as don't listen to the customer. What I'm really saying is don't let each customer feedback you get along your journey immediately change what's urgent on the roadmap, immediately change how we're going to go sell on the sales side or how we're going to support on the support side, because that feedback loop can feel really good that you're getting it, but can be really misleading because it's a small sample set. And I think when we think about now at kind of a larger scales, we see that all the time. You're at takeoff mode. You have a couple $1,000,000 of revenue, maybe even $5,000,000 of revenue. The next 5,000,000 can really change the value and the trajectory of your business, even the ability to be profitable, never need money, maybe the next couple $1,000,000, the next customer deal away. So you're so inclined to take that customer feedback and want to land the deal that it turns into bright, shiny object syndrome. And that's what I'm really trying to portray here is what can feel like you're moving fast or with urgency, what can feel like you're listening to the customer can actually be a lot of noise to your team. And for that matter, to the market, if what you're selling this week or next week or this month and next month changes. So it may feel like I'm being a little bit repetitive on this point. There's a fine line between listening to the market and gathering market feedback, which we are highly encourage at Edison. We're big fans of customer advisory groups and surveying and all that kind of thing. It's just, you have to be careful that you got true sample size and that you've got enough, call it information, to sort of make a change to the roadmap or to the strategy. Because it may feel good to make a change because that feels like I'm taking action. It may feel like I'm showing urgency because I'm taking action. But what you're really doing is creating a bunch more uncertainty around the business, if you will. As we think more about kind of peeling the onion back to real life, if you think about what pressures there are, let's say you have investors for a second and a board. We can talk about the you don't, and it's just you and your team as well. But sort of in our hypothetical here of when to take that customer feedback and make a change or have it kind of impact you, I think as you think about institutionally backed businesses, Edison investing a board with not just investors, but real operators at the table, I think generally speaking, the board and that feedback from the customer shouldn't be immediately changing a roadmap. And I know that sounds pretty trite, but I've seen it happen where one comment by a board member or one customer interaction can all of a sudden say, aha, that's it. If only we did this, now you're running down a path. Because the pressure to make your numbers when you have a board and external investors really does change. You feel the heat, if you will. So let's just talk about for a second, what would be enough feedback or what would be enough information in that setting? Have we just flat out not been able to book business, right? The market's telling us they don't want what we've got. And suddenly we got a couple of customers telling us an ad here or a tweak there, or frankly, a different way to think about your product would cause us to buy. Clearly that's the signs are there, right? You can't have multiple quarters of misses and not booking business without changing something. I think the point that we see around boardrooms, and I call it the bright, shiny object, is it tends to show itself in verticals. A salesperson, we are really good in these three verticals. We sell to, I'll just make it up. We sell to higher ed, we sell to charitable organizations, and we sell to family offices. You get the sense that maybe we're selling something that has to do with kind of higher net worth and directing charitable contributions in this make believe. And suddenly a salesperson comes back and says, these financial services companies will buy from us if we do this. Completely different market, frankly, a completely different product, but if only. And now everyone starts spinning because that customer represents a really big opportunity because financial services alone may be bigger than our current addressable market today. So we take a bunch of things, that one piece of information, and we assume bigger addressable market, lots of opportunity, bigger deal size, but now the entire organization is shifting based on feedback from one or two customers. That's what I mean by unhealthy, chasing the shiny object. What could you do instead? Okay, we're going to set aside resources, a SWAT team, pick your own sort of reference for SEAL team analogy. we're going to let this set of resources go explore if financial services is the path to either faster growth, additional growth, or a whole new set of products. That's the way to address that. And don't even, frankly, bring to the board or to your investors until you know something more than we have a suspicion that something might be there, because it creates this impression of lack of focus and, quite frankly, unhealthy urgency, running to shiny objects. Now you're a company that's not even institutional backed, just good old fashioned. We're landing customers, we're bootstrapped, we're booking business and growing our company. There's no external force causing you to have to grow faster. But if you think about what the impact of feedback from one customer sends to the whole organization, it's very similar. But in your situation where I use the board or the investors as the lever to feel like you're in control of the business as a CEO, now you're a founder and CEO and your team's relying on you to set the tone and we're here to execute. Very similar set of circumstances. It's just not externally you're feeling pressure. It's internally what you're doing to your team. If each time customer feedback changes the direction of the business, it's going to feel urgent for sure. It's just not going to feel real healthy, right? So I guess what I'm trying to make sure is clear is it doesn't matter what's causing this desire to go run to the next thing. Be really careful before multiple parties start to think that there's some change in direction, and make sure you're not just sort of cherry picking the most recent piece of information to go drive a very strategic, important kind of vision of the business. What we heard from CEOs in our CEO summit on this conversation was it wasn't so much the next bright, shiny object, although that came up a lot, as much as it was we felt like we needed to do something different because we weren't necessarily growing as fast as we wanted to. So you're kind of in search of the next thing because the current thing isn't delivering the growth or hitting the ambition you're looking to hit. So there's two ways to look at this. It's I got to grow faster, or there's something wrong with the current product market fit. And I think what I would challenge is it could be none of the above. It could be you just don't have enough information and you need to take a breath, go slow to go fast, and go gather more information. One customer is telling me if only I had this, they would sign up. Can I get 3, 4, 5 of them to tell me? One existing customer is telling me I need a few more features, but should I go survey the whole customer base or use my customer success team to go ask this roadmap? Now, what I didn't say yet was CEO setting the product roadmap, which is what most founders do until they get to scale and they hire chief product officers or VPs of product. It is quite natural in our world where the product vision and roadmap is set by the CEO for quite a while, particularly product-oriented or engineering-oriented CEOs. Sometimes that sales CEOs hand that off earlier. So I don't think it's unhealthy for the CEO to kind of be in charge of product vision. What's unhealthy is if that product vision is changing by the day or week or even month with kind of last interaction changing it. And so I'm sharing all this because we see this quite a bit. And what it gives the sense to an investor and a board is either a lack of focus or a lack of commitment to execution, as opposed to what might feel like, hey, we're taking action, right? There's the good part of that is, hey, we're doing something. Well, just doing something is not always the answer. Although I would say, as I'm giving all this advice and these thoughts, doing nothing is also not the answer if you are missing your numbers continuously. So guess what? Congratulations, you're a CEO, and these are really hard problems. And as one of the better books out there by a CEO has been in the news for some AI comments they're making. But the hard thing about hard things is, as a startup or young company, emerging growth CEO, there is that conundrum, that constant push and pull of, am I making this decision because it's the last piece of information I heard, or am I making this decision because I now have enough information that we have to change what we're doing? I hope that makes sense to all of you out there, but we do see this all the time where just taking action feels good, so I'm going to take action. Be careful not to fall in that trap. And I wish I could frame this in a really, for lack of a better word, simplistic framework, steps 1, 2, 3, or ABC. These are kind of harder, more complex problems than making it that simple, to be blunt. But allow me to give you a couple of thoughts. At the very least, when customer feedback comes directly to you or from a salesperson to you about your product vision or your product roadmap, take that for what it is, one piece of information. And is it truly feature functionality, or is it really a wholesale change? Only you can know that because you know what your product is supposed to do. And hey, this sounds more like, what are they, is it a feature? Is it a bug? Right? Kind of, but is it fundamental to the product offering? I'd say one, create a framework for deciding, is this really a feature or is this fundamental to the product roadmap? How do you create that decision for yourself? I can answer that because it's really a product oriented, but I'd say be careful that you're not making everything into it's just another feature, because that makes it sound easy. It makes it sound like we should go run and do it right away. Because often we hear that it's just a simple thing. If we just do this, and the development team, the engineering team doesn't want to say, no, that's wholesale change. The other is, how am I gathering information as a young, earlier stage versus larger scale company? Having rigor around your feedback loop is really important. Now, I get it. You only have 2 customers. There's not so many places you can go, but I would say the market's more willing to share their feelings if they're not thinking you're just trying to sell them something. So a framework for gathering enough data, and you could argue there's never enough data to make a completely informed decision. That's certainly a valid argument. But I would just say, science-wise, 1 is certainly not enough. 2 is not enough. I would argue if you're selling to an enterprise level customer, you need at least a handful, 4 or 5 or 6 customers telling you the same thing. And it may not be their customers already, prospects telling you the same thing about product market fit and value creation for them or value add for them. On the flip side, if you're selling to the long tail, use the internet and the reach of the internet to your advantage. Like survey, right? Don't be afraid to really pulse your customer base with really short surveys. I know this sounds really, really basic, but I'm surprised how many times we'll meet companies and entrepreneurs who don't have a systemic way to survey and get customer feedback. So there's a couple of thoughts to create a framework, if you will. The last one I'd leave you with is there someone, whether it's a board member, if you have a board, is it a mentor if you don't have a board, or an advisor that you can sort of bounce the idea off of in kind of a safe space? So if it's a board member, you want to make sure that board member knows this is a conversation about, I think this is a small thing, a tweak to the product versus this is a big thing, but let's put it through the paces, and having someone else challenge your assumptions. Because I think what happens a lot of times, especially in earlier stage companies, the entrepreneurs feel like they're on an island. The CEOs feel like they're alone in this. And I think if you don't have a board, people are more than happy to advise businesses. And obviously that can feel like a dime a dozen. But the point is, don't take this challenge on alone, and don't necessarily think your internal executive team is going to give you kind of I use the word the truth, because a lot of times they're giving you answers they think you want to hear. So the last bit is, they're a third party. As you get scale, customer advisory boards are just absolutely gold. And you want to be careful you're using those advisory boards to really ask open-ended questions as opposed to steering them in a direction you want them to go. But that's further down the line on the customer advisory board part. Just find a sounding board that can help you walk through, is this small or is this big, if you will, in the grand scheme of your vision and your product roadmap.
Thank you for joining this episode of Electrifying Growth. For more resources, inspiration, and a look inside the Edison Partners network, sign up for our newsletter at www.edisonpartners.com. Click on the Stay in the Know button in the top right corner of our webpage. Thank you again.